And finally tonight, we're going to look a little bit more at Pope Francis and the latest interview that he has given to La Croix newspaper in France, a major newspaper. This is so stunning that it's really hard to believe. I mean, we know that the globalists are moving on every front to overthrow culture, to forcibly mix incompatible groups of people together, to create a balkanized, divided population worldwide. But this is simply incredible. Constantinople was overthrown, the former headquarters of the Christian church, by the Muslims, and they forcibly converted the population, men, women, and children, by the sword to Islam. Islam, in its dominant historical form, kills anyone that does not submit to it or sells them into slavery, because if you're not a member of the faith, you're subhuman and deserve it. Look at Muslim countries today. They can't even get along with each other. The different factions are constantly killing each other. I have nothing against these people inherently, but the fact that the West, that claims it's the birthplace of liberty and freedom, is inviting this in is cultural suicide. But let's look at the Pope. And this mirrors what imams are saying, mirrors what German ministers are saying. We've played the clips just yesterday where the German government spokesperson for the Muslims says, we're soon going to take over your women, and blonde-haired, blue eyes is bad. And the Germans clap and love it. Pope Francis likens Jesus to ISIS, says Muslims and migrants must breed with Europeans. The story's on Infowars.com. These are direct quotes. In a shocking interview, Pope Francis likened Jesus Christ to ISIS and said Muslim migrants must breed with Europeans to counter declining birth rates. So they teach Europeans with regulations and taxes not to have children and say that we're overpopulated, and then bring in people who say we're not going to mix with your culture, we're going to dominate it. This is the Pope speaking. Today, I don't think that there is a fear of Islam such as ISIS and its war of conquest, which is partly drawn from Islam, he told the French newspaper. It is true that the idea of conquest is inherent in the soul of Islam. However, it is also possible to interpret the objective in Matthew's gospel, where Jesus sends his disciples to all nations in terms of the same idea of conquest. No, he said go out and teach brotherly and sisterly love, do unto others as you'd have do unto them, and don't be part of big wars. And don't persecute people that don't believe like you. But he's now equating Christianity with Islam. The Pope also said he, quote, dreaded, this is a quote, hearing about the Christian roots of Europe. Oh, it's so horrible. Because to him, they take on a colonialist overtone. So let's demonize Europe more. Well, this is Europe that's being colonized now. And he called on European nations to, quote, integrate Muslim migrants into the continent. When Saudi Arabia won't take one of the refugees that are really jihadis that failed to invade Syria, failed to take it over, they're being kicked out now through Turkey into Europe by the Russians and others. And they're not going back to Saudi Arabia or Qatar or other countries because they are basically the detritus that's been dumped on Syria, dumped on Turkey, and now dumped on Europe. This integration is all the more necessary today, quoting the false Pope, since as a result of selfish search for well-being, Europe is experiencing the grave problem of declining birth rate. He stated a demographic emptiness is developing. Well, I mean, I'm sorry, not only did a lot of the men go become priests, they then became pedophiles. So that's another problem of the dying demographics. His opinions are stunningly similar to those of top Imam Aid, who said Muslims should exploit the migrant crisis to breed with Europeans and conquer their countries. We have all the links in the article. Because of time, I'm not going to play them here today. Now let's move on. Let's look at other wondrous things that are being brought here to undermine and collapse the nation state. The multinationals have already collapsed the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, Asia, to a great extent. Now they're bringing in the most unskilled, diseased people from Eastern Europe, Middle East, you name it, to further weigh down the country and bankrupt it. That's why the cult M16 223 was developed. I guess they call it 5.56 now in the Army, because the bullet's so small but so fast, it fragments and doesn't usually kill you, but wounds you horribly. And they admitted that that was to get around NATO not allowing soft point bullets, but full metal jacket. And so it's an anti-personnel bullet that maims and causes 5 or 6 people to have to take care of them. And that's what Cloward and Pivot is, the strategy to bankrupt the economy, bankrupt the country, have people so dependent and so sick and dumbed down that the whole system collapses. That's how you conquer the nation. Then you come in and change the policies once you've done it. Here's a story out of Breitbart using U.S. government numbers. 22% of resettled refugees in Minnesota test positive for tuberculosis, much of it drug-resistant TB, a death sentence. Continuing, they don't let anybody like that, though, into the Vatican that has 200-foot walls. And then there's another story out of the Star Tribune. After 20 years of decline, tuberculosis inches up in the U.S. So we've got to wear spacesuits once we know it's around us, but we don't test the immigrants coming in like we did 100 years ago at Ellis Island. This is a nation, a culture being designed for suicide. And speaking of cultural suicide, we are going to play a short clip of this. This is a person who admits he's a pedophile. Here's the headline. Salon reports this. I'm a pedophile, but not a monster. The new civil right is to have somebody pay for your sex change. The new civil right is to have somebody pay for your abortion. And he goes on to talk about reports of, hanging out with a 5-year-old girl he's babysitting. But he's so virtuous, he didn't do anything. It just goes on and on. According to Nickerson, at age 18, he babysat a 5-year-old girl and fell in love with her. Since he never wanted to act on his urges, he chose privately to relieve himself. And it just goes on. They've written scores of articles at Salon the last few years promoting pedophilia and selling it like it's just loving. And we have government in the U.S. saying, we're going to give your kids inoculations because they consent, or abortions because they consent. The age of consent is 18. If you have sex with a 10-year-old or give them drugs, and just because they said they wanted to have sex or use drugs, you have raped them or you have drugged them and contributed to the delinquency of a minor. You have violated their rights to grow up and develop a free will. And to have the state and the media and others promoting this like it's a good idea is totally, absolutely sickening, because if they can get away with promoting pedophilia, they can do anything. Let's play a clip right now.
Babysitting gig. She was 5. She was a precocious girl. She was advanced for her age. She was also very independent. A lot of my fantasies actually revolve around little girls who are in some way more powerful than I am. Eventually, my attraction became, overwhelming to the point I had to go relieve myself in the bathroom.
What we're witnessing here is the absolute mainlining of evil. Because if they can get you to accept ISIS flooding Europe or pedophiles saying they're loving, good, upright people and are virtuous, and openly advertise that, the sky is the limit. Now, I've got other articles here that I'll be covering tomorrow on the radio, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., but here's the bottom line. The globalists want to conquer the world, but they know that tyrants have always fallen. So they want to short-circuit common sense and short-circuit the family and any type of fealty where people are territorial and stand up for themselves. We're not being domesticated to enter some wondrous future Star Trek world where we all live in peace and colonize deep space. We're being domesticated like I guess you would cut the legs off a guinea pig and pull the teeth out of a guinea pig you wanted to feed to a prize boa constrictor to make sure it didn't scratch or bite the boa when it was about to eat it. We're being defanged and dehorned so that these cosmic con artists, these cosmic pedophiles, these cosmic pieces of degenerate filth can have their ways with us. We are being farmed. We are being prepared for the dinner table of the globalists, and every ounce of my core humanity stands against it. This has been another edition of Teleprompter Free News, produced right here in Austin, Texas. God bless you all. Great job with the crew. Please spread the word about this transmission, because the establishment does not want anybody to be aware of these actual facts we're breaking down. See you back tomorrow.